Alrighty, good evening everyone. Welcome to what's the first in hopefully a series of little showcase nights we'll be doing over the course of semester. It seems like such an obvious choice to start off with these field reporting trips for the first showcase night because they're such a really exciting thing that the school does and produces such amazing high quality work. So what we're going to be doing over the course of the evening, and especially very exciting for the students that are just about to go off to Jaipur, is we're going to be showcasing some of those works as well as then doing a bit of a panel discussion and some Q&As so you guys can ask some questions. So hopefully you don't freak out just as much when you're overseas, because I certainly know that I did. I think it's a bit of a natural process though. So that's what we'll be doing this evening. We've got some very exciting speakers who've gone on those trips, including some very exciting alumni as well, much later in the evening, which I'm very thrilled about. So first I'm going to introduce Bruce, who probably doesn't need much of an introduction because he does it very well himself. But he'll be coming up. We'll have a little chat about, of course, some of the very exciting trips we've been on. So everyone give a quick little hands to Bruce.
Thank you.
No worries, you're very welcome. Bruce, I mean, it's such a great trip. Could you tell me about the idea? When did it start?
Well, we really need to thank Matt Peterson. Matt was the manager of media and production support back in 2012 and some years before that, but he applied for the first grant from the Federal Education Department and managed to get enough money for 10 students to go to Vietnam. After that very successful trip, we didn't really think we were going to go anywhere else. Nicole Rowles was on that trip, and she'll be able to tell you all about how successful it was, but we didn't know that this was going to be replicated. And then along came the new Colombo plan. And so after Matt went to join UQX and produce MOOCs, I was able to start applying for funding and getting that from the new Colombo plan. So we've had, this is the 7th overseas trip. We've got 2 more next year at least that are funded. So a total of about $500,000 coming from the federal government over the last few years. So first of all, we should thank Matt, but secondly, we really should thank the new Colombo plan for the financing of this extraordinary opportunity.
You've really tried to drive this program to keep it afloat. What sort of benefit do you think is in it for students?
Well, I've not only gone on these courses, but I've done study of them. It's the subject of my PhD. And my argument in that research is that work-integrated learning, which is what we do, is actually the best way to learning it by doing. And so these courses offer you the opportunity to learn by doing all the time, but you've got somebody standing over your shoulder, Paul Smith and me, who can give you help when you need it. So we're not really lecturers and tutors, we're coaches, and we want you to produce the very best quality product that you can while you're away. So it's a different sort of style, and you're doing several stories in a week. Whereas if you're doing a course over a semester, you might do 3 assignments. So it's a much more intensive, experiential process than a regular lecture.
And what do people in the industry say about, something that's very unique that UQ are doing?
Well, Nicole was actually hosting a program which was called the Vietnam Quarter for ABC News 24 in 2012. We offered it to News 24. I have old colleagues who were running the place at that time, and they snapped it up and ran the program. And it was a highlight of the products that students produced in Vietnam. From there, the ABC generally has become extremely excited by the prospect of the work that we do. They often have used our stories on programs. But more than that, they're looking at our students who have come back from overseas as potential employees who've got it all. Because they have to shoot, they have to write, they have to edit, they have to do that for television and radio and photojournalism and multimedia. So they know at the ABC and elsewhere that if you're going to hire anybody straight out of university, these are the people to hire. And I'm very excited by the number of people I know who have gone into top-line broadcasting jobs and newspapers and multimedia jobs around the country. And I just keep on getting emails from students and graduates who have said, wow, this amazing thing has happened to me, and it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't gone on that overseas trip.
And of course, expressions of interest open soon for the next trip. Tell us a little bit about that.
Anybody who's interested in going to Indonesia in first semester next year, 2018, will need to send us an expression of interest before the end of this semester. So look out for an email that Sven will send you. It'll also be posted on the JACS page so that you can look at Facebook and see that you need to get your application in. And what we're looking for there is an indication from you that you know the sort of story that you want to cover when you go, that you have a real commitment to journalism as your future career, and that you're not afraid of this opportunity, that you actually want to embrace it.
Bruce Tarr, thanks very much for that.
My
Cheers.
pleasure.
Everyone, Bruce. So we'll get straight into it. Just speaking about Indonesia then, of course. The first lot we've got coming up have been some of the most recent students who've gone, including myself, because I'll give myself a shameless self-plug, to Indonesia. So enjoy.
Even you live on the dump, but you are not rubbish, you are not the waste, but you are the agents of change. So if you want to do something one day, you can be something useful and powerful.
You know, when you notice you sit in the car and you see trash pickers, we, Indonesian, we would just turn around, turn our face. You do like this. Yeah. We don't want to see them because we feel sorry for them, but we don't know what to help. It's signs of poor. It's signs of poor features, but that's the way it is. This is, you know, in the developed country, for example, you yourself, I don't even know what to do with my trash. Well, that's because you do the sorting. After you do the sorting, you have a company who do something about what you have sorted. But also, you have a mindset, you have a culture of not throwing everywhere. Now, in Indonesia, we don't have that mindset, we don't have the culture, we don't have the system. So that's what it created.
Indonesia is the world's second largest contributor of plastic in our oceans. Jakarta continues to produce a staggering 6,500 tonnes of waste each day. Yet Jakarta has one of the least developed and unsustainable solid waste management systems of any major city. Trash pickers, known as pemulung in Indonesia, live on these inefficiencies and are the first step in recycling Jakarta's vast amounts of waste. They live on or around dump sites and landfills. With bare hands, they spend long hours sifting through mountains of rotting, unsorted waste. And for the 450,000 trash pickers living in Jakarta, it's the only way they can survive. Retno Hapsari is the General Manager of Excess Project, a non-for-profit organisation that works closely with trash picker families in Jakarta.
So the average income of these trash pickers is about 50,000 rupiah. So when they carry the bag or they pull the cart, the whole trash that they collect worth value of 50,000. So that's probably just enough for them to eat one day. So then they don't even think of sending their kids to school because they don't have money to pay schools. So by the time the kids age 10 or 12, the parents probably will ask, come on kids, let's go help me picking up trash so that we can get more trash, so that we can get more money to eat. So this cycle will just continue.
Indonesia has a diverse legacy of art and culture. One subset of this is Betawi culture from Jakarta. The Betawi traditional art form of ondel-ondel has changed drastically over the centuries. The puppets were once used to repel wandering spirits, but have come to symbolise much more as Indonesians seek to link their cultural roots to modern Jakarta. President of the Institution of Betawi Culture, Ghea Saputra, is an expert on the topic.
Ondel-ondel itu terdiri atas dua.
There are two kinds of ondel-ondel, male and female. The male has a red or black face, and the female has a white face. That is a symbol of the balance of nature, the human nature with non-human nature, the upper and lower realms. So the coupling of ondel-ondel creates the harmony of life, since they protect each other from human nature and non-human nature. Therefore, her face is white, symbolic of nature of women, gentleness, patience, and loyalty. The male's face symbolizes restlessness, wrath, so that's why his face is black or red. When both become united, there is balance. If there is only one, then it will be lousy and have no strength.
Di antara manusia dengan alam bukan manusia, yang lemah dengan yang maha kuasa, begitu. Jadi
While this harmony between the two has always existed, Wayang Museum coordinator Sumadi says that the ondel-ondel have changed immensely since they first became part of Indonesian culture 12 centuries ago.
Indonesia terkenal dengan budaya adat ketimurannya. Punya budi pekerti yang sangat halus, lembut, lemah dan
Ondel-ondel did look scary to most people. Here in Indonesia, we are welcoming and have warm hearts. We are open to everybody and very soft people. So, we altered the ondel-ondel image so people wouldn't feel scared. Every time children looked at the older puppets, they felt frightened to meet with the ondel-ondel. That's why, around the 90s, we tried to change their appearance. As you can see now, there are no ugly teeth outside the mouth. They are just smiling.
1995. Ondel-ondel yang tadinya berwajah serem, kita coba gubah menjadi suatu tampilan yang menarik. Selain itu,
currently, in 2017, ondel-ondel are the icon or symbol of Jakarta City, particularly for guests. Now, knowledge of Betawi culture, the native ethnic group of Jakarta, will be known worldwide.
Jakarta menetapkan bahwa ikon budaya Betawi harus ditetapkan.
Here at Museum Wayang in Jakarta, there are displays on Indonesian puppets through the ages. Over time, cultural features in this urban setting have been disappearing, but with the help of passionate artists, guides and historians, Betawi culture, particularly ondel-ondel, are here to stay.
Sekarang ini emang merosot semua, menurun semua.
John Condon is an agricultural journalist and has written about the beef market for decades. The billion-dollar live export industry in Australia depends heavily on Indonesia, with the foreign nation relying on Australian cattle to supply over 1/3 of their beef market.
It's an enormously attractive market for Australia, even though it's still a developing economy, and its ability to pay obviously is a lot less than a developed country like Japan, for example. But we see Indonesia as one of our absolutely priority markets for cattle or beef from Australia in coming years, particularly as the economy continues to grow.
In Indonesia, demand for beef has been increasing steadily as the wealthy middle class grows in size. Unfortunately for Indonesians, the purchase price of cattle from Australia is historically high because of 2 years of drought bringing supply to a 30-year low. Additionally, costs at all points of the supply chain have increased, resulting in a much higher price for beef.
And as a result, basic supply and demand. Supply is short, so price goes up. and the Indonesians currently are having to pay considerably higher prices for Australian cattle than they have previously.
The majority of beef in Indonesia is bought and sold at local wet markets, with the substantially increased prices turning many lower class consumers off purchasing the meat. As a result, the local operators, or pedagang, have seen their profit margins substantially reduced.
Dia ngelihat keadaan pasar aja, rame nggak ramenya. Kalau giliran rame ya bisa 120. Tapi kalau giliran sepi hanya 115. 18, 16, 10, 4 tahun. Iya, konsumen kan berkurang pasti ya kalau harga daging naik kan. Pembeli juga jarang. Belum. Baru kuliah yang besar.
Dicky Adewoso owns feedlots in Indonesia that import Australian cattle. He says that the pricing problem is compounded by confusing and contradictory policy.
The policy is over-engineered by the government. The government are looking at try to solve a problem that was created in the past. They try to create it to solve the problem short term. So they created an artificial supply and demand. One is for them to support the local farmers, increase the numbers of cattle for breeding and so on. In the meantime, they also are forced to reduce the price for another populist policy for the consumers. So like today, right now, they ask us to sell the beef at 80,000 rupiah. In the meantime, because our cost of goods sold has already gone up above that 80,000, close to about 110,000. And that's where it is very contradictory policies on both sides.
I'll bring up Elora and Jenna now, who are just on those videos you've just seen. Oh. Thanks for coming, guys. I really appreciate it. It's very exciting. Alrighty, I guess, Elora, you're up first. How'd you find Indonesia?
It was my first time overseas, actually, so it was an experience, and I often found like the silver lining to things that were disheartening for other people in the group because everything was so new and exciting. Like, I know even like the humidity and all that kind of stuff that generally can get you down was just meant that I was in a different country, so it was exciting. But what really did end up getting me down was I got a bit of culture shock because, you know, I'd never experienced anything like it. Australia was all that I knew and all that was familiar. So I think my main issue was it was like just the pace of everyday life, and you know, you just have to get used to, because I'm someone who's like 5 minutes early to everything, and so on our first interview in Indonesia, we were 12 minutes late, and my anxiety was like way up here, you know, doing my first interview in Betawi. So yeah, it was nerve-wracking, and then every new interview we got progressively later, and I was progressively just more comfortable with it because that was just like the way of life.
That was the norm, yeah. I was an hour and a half late to my first interview, so I was so triggered. It was very, very upsetting.
Yeah.
Jenna, how'd you find it?
I found it was a really amazing experience, just the fact that all the people I got to meet through it. So you get partnered up with a buddy, and I was really lucky. I got a great buddy, and she was really helpful and really friendly, and so she kind of like took us out to do like Indonesian things. So she's like, oh, you have to try this food, we have to go here, we have to do this. So that was really great in itself. And then the story I chose to do, kind of the way it wasn't exactly what I planned when I first began, and it kind of evolved as I was over there, and through that I got to meet like some amazing women and just amazing people working in the community, and like just that in itself was such a great experience, I think.
Excellent. I'll throw it open to the floor. Any questions about some of the pieces you've just seen, or maybe what to expect, or any hints and tricks or tips or anything like that? Yep.
Did you find the language barrier disconcerting, or did it become easier to deal with as you went on?
Yeah, so the question, did find the language barrier concerning? Yeah, well, I've got a funny little lapel mic here, so that's very exciting, but I will put you guys on the spot in a second. Yeah, I mean, certainly we definitely had 1 or 2 language classes just before we went, so I could say about as much as hello, and even still I forgot that about halfway through as well, so please don't quiz me on my Bahasa later. I found that doing interviews in another language was very stressful, because here I was not knowing how the interview was going or whether I was getting any of the content that I felt that I wanted, that I, you know, because everyone goes into a bit of a story with an idea in mind as to how it's going to pan out. So I found that really quite stressful, but I think I found an inner peace in just realizing what'll happen will happen. So I think you certainly do get to that point. In mine there at the food markets, it was so noisy and loud and intense anyway, that I just couldn't hear anything. I was awfully, dreadfully sick, so I just kind of tried to deal with it. How about you guys, the language barrier?
Yeah, because we had our translators with us like the whole time, you know, and I think it wasn't too big of an issue. But it's a different way of conducting an interview, because you're used to kind of developing more questions as you go. It's more of a conversation, and you get kind of more of an idea of how your piece is coming along, but you don't really get a picture in your head of, you know, what your piece is about really, until, you know, you get back and your translator has finally given you your translations like 2 weeks later when the assignment is due. Like, yeah. So it was stressful in that. And I also felt like I was learning so much about stuff that I feel like I should have known before I got there, after I got back. So that was difficult, but it all came together in the end, and I'm happy with how it went.
Cool. Any other questions? Yeah.
Kind of on that same note, I'm trying to wrap my head around pairing the translation that you guys get with the actual video of them speaking, because I don't really know like when a new sentence is started in a different language, that sort of thing. Do you have any tips for like getting segments of like interviews or something?
So the question is pairing subtitles or the translation with the video. Yeah. Look, I just totally winged it. So that's probably the worst advice that I could give. I did, however, sit with my buddy, because I tried to do it as much as I could when I was overseas. I sat with my buddy and went, this? And she was like, yeah. So I'm fairly convinced I did a reasonable job. But certainly, I mean, and it does relate, you know, you're not quite sure what the phrasing's like, that sort of thing. So it's all about the local knowledge, but there's plenty of amazing contacts. And generally, you're still in a good workflow with your buddy, so you can send back little short clips. And what do you think of that? Is that mostly paired up? And they'll be surely happy to give you advice on pairing up that sort of text with the vision. Yeah, did you have any thoughts on that one?
Well, my buddy, we had a system, because she gave me the translations once I was home, so she went through it and would put like the time marker and then do the English for each time on the video. Sometimes that still got a bit confusing, but you can kind of just listen to the words and you can hear him saying the word that like you think is the right one, and then you're like, yeah, that should be right. And you kind of wing it, like you said, it's winging it a bit, but they do help a lot still. So.
Yeah. There's one over here. Yep.
How did you guys go sourcing your sources, especially with the language barrier as well? Is that easy, hard?
Well, I think yours is a good example, Jenna.
Yeah, so mine, I had a really good source before I went over there. I found her online, and she was really, she spoke English. She was the first lady that we saw, and her English was really good, so we communicated well like that. And then once I got over there, I had a few sources already set up, and then I actually found on like the last day of my trip my last source, and she ended up being the most amazing source, like, because I couldn't get onto the large landfill that I wanted to go to because we didn't have a permit. So I was like, oh no, what do I do? So I went online and I looked up like how I could get on there without a permit, and then I found this photographer who had gotten access to the landfill, and he had stayed with this woman, and she actually had a it's like a volunteer kind of housing on the landfill. And so I contacted her, and she was like, oh yeah, come, you know, you can come and see me and meet up with me. And so I got to interview her, got to like tour around the whole landfill and everything. And it was just kind of like not having things set in stone and being able to be flexible with it kind of helps a lot with.
Yeah, being flexible is really important, because my story, like I had a story idea, and it I sent it to my like buddy, and she's like, that doesn't really interest me at all. And I was like, oh, okay, what were you thinking? And she said, well, like my story is about this, I want to do it about this artist, and he makes these little ondel, which are those puppets in my piece. And from there, I kind of like researched what ondel were, and I said I want an expert on the topic. I want someone from like some other artists, and like I was looking at Indonesian news articles, like Google translating them, and like I'm like, okay, there's a designer, like is that like, and it was really hard to find people's names in the articles because you're like, is that something that wasn't translated or is that someone's name? And then it was really cool because I just went into a museum and we just asked like the museum coordinator like if he would talk to us, and yeah, like everyone, it's just like a lot of just coming up with stuff on the spot. Yeah.
Yeah, I think when Bruce talks very validly about observational journalism, it's incredibly important when you're overseas, because a lot of that market stuff is just sort of going there, seeing what's going on and just asking, like, please, will you talk to me? So yeah, I think sourcing, it's very, you have to be very upfront, but some things fall in your lap and some things fall through very easily. Yeah, we'll take one more question. I think there was another one over here.
I was just about sourcing, so
I love it. Excellent. One more question then. Anyone got anything? No, that's cool. All right, let's move on to the next one. Could everyone give Elora and Jenna a big, lovely, warm round of applause? So next we have coming up, basically we had a few students last year, well, plenty of students, because going over to India, it seems like that the grant is quite substantial. And we had students going over to Mumbai. So we've got 2 of those Mumbai students here. I've also snuck in a package from 2015 Vietnam because we've also got John Bryant here, who was very involved in the society earlier. So sit back, relax, we've got another bit coming up.
Domestic violence has been here since long. Over the time, it has changed its the way it is expressed or it is manifested, basically. But domestic violence has been through, and it starts from basic taunts or basic verbal abuse, from there to even physical abuse, sexual abuse. So it's a big spectrum, I would say. All the age groups, I would say, right from young adolescents to even older women, though it's more common among married women, about 24 to 20 to 30s. But across castes, across different classes, even elite class and also the lower class, it's been there.
For years, millions of women and children have been victims to domestic violence and sexual abuse. This is a major human rights issue that is often overlooked, excused or denied. The severity of this issue has forced Mumbai to take action against it.
Domestic violence, if we look at the literal sense, it means it's defined as something, the affairs, the violence that happens in the domestic front, at homes and all. But for me today, it goes beyond that. I feel if a relative sort of, is violent towards you, or if you are exposed to any kind of violence in and around your surrounding, you can count that even as domestic violence. Real rape or, any kind of violence that happens after a person is married to someone else, can that be counted as real violence? Which is, I think, a very sad thing, because I don't know, the way Indians think, I think once you're married, you're the property of your husband, and it's very sad because then they believe that the husband can do anything with the wife and vice versa as well.
Victims have been tortured and controlled by their abusers, from threats, intimidation, and physical violence.
I had a patient who would say that my husband wants to make love to me 8 times a day, 9 times a day. And if I don't, he's beating me up. And she would not be able to say, like, she would go to a family in our culture, once you are already married, it becomes very difficult to go back to your parents. Like, parents usually don't want, because there's not so much of education, awareness and all of that. So I would tell her that, why don't you go back home? She said, no, I have children who will take care of my children. So, one social cause another keeps overlapping, and the problem becomes too much mentally for a person to take. She's not getting sleep. She's not having an appetite. She doesn't feel like talking to anyone. She doesn't feel like taking a shower anymore, dressing up, looking nice, nothing.
Each year, over 60,000 Vietnamese students journey abroad to study at foreign universities. Of that number, more than 24,000 travel to Australia, making it the leading destination for international studies. Mr. Quinton Derrick is the director of the English Language Institute in Da Nang, Vietnam. He says many Vietnamese students intend to enrol in postgraduate education overseas.
Most of our students are looking to study abroad. It's a huge driver for them now to get that experience and bring back a qualification that's internationally recognised. I think for Vietnamese students, it's not too far for them to go. We have a long history with Vietnam. Last year we celebrated the 40-year anniversary of diplomatic relations between the two countries. There's a lot of Vietnamese that live in Australia now. I think there's over 500,000 Vietnamese living in Australia. So they know there's access to things like that. Also, we have such a good reputation for education that that's a very big draw card for them to go.
Mr. Yung Can Lee is the Vice Director of the Da Nang People's Committee Investment Promotion Centre. In 2004, he completed his Masters of Business at the University of Queensland.
I think Australia got a very good, excellent education system, and I think Australian people are very, friendly, hospitable. The weather is nice, and I think the very good environment also, and a learning environment also for students, international students.
While the general impression of Australia seems to be positive, some Vietnamese students have raised their concerns.
I'm a kind of easy person, so I like almost everything about Australia. But from time to time, I find that when I first started, I feel there's a kind of not a racism among the classmates, but I think it's not there. It's not very obvious, but that is what I feel. It could be my fear of not being able to integrate into the community at that time when I first started the course. But when I built up my confidence, I think that faded, and then I didn't see that problem anymore.
The number of Vietnamese students studying in Australia has dropped by more than 12% since 2010. There are some concerns that this statistic may be linked to publicised attacks on foreign students in Melbourne and more recently in Brisbane.
I don't hear a lot of people talking about the safety issues in Australia here from our students. I think most students these days are pretty adept at reading as much information or gathering as much information as they can to make an informed decision. And the fact that a lot of the Vietnamese students here have relatives in Australia, they know that everything's been fine. I think it has an impact when things like Melbourne and recently in Brisbane, these things happen. It may impact on numbers in the short term, but overall I think people realise this is a common occurrence all over the world.
While the number of Vietnamese students has decreased in the past 2 years, Australia is still the destination of choice for those wanting to study abroad.
In the hustle and heat of South Mumbai, amongst the thousands of taxis and private cars, there's a strange yet slightly familiar sight. Along the famous Marine Drive, close towards the Taj Mahal Hotel, tourists are getting into large silver carriages. They throw back to the time of British colonialism. These carriages are drawn by what are called Victoria horses. In recent years, though, there's been a growing public outcry against the use of Victoria horses in Mumbai, as many of the horses are seen as being overworked and abused. There's also been a legal crackdown on the Victoria horse carriages, with the Bombay High Court last year declaring the use of horse-drawn carriages in the city illegal. The case of the Victoria horses is controversial in Mumbai and has divided public opinion. Some want the practice of using horses to draw tourists around Mumbai's hotspots to be phased out, and some have even called for a complete ban. Others, though, believe not only are the Victoria horses an important part of the city's heritage, but they are the livelihood of hundreds of families. We set out to try and find out what is going on with the High Court case and what the future of Victoria horses may be. Let's first break down the recent court case. The case was brought forth by animal welfare activists, who argued that because of the well-documented prevalence of diseases amongst the horses, as well as the use of banned spike mouth bites and the overworking of the horses, they argued that the use of these Victoria horses was against the 1960 Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act. The Bombay High Court agreed, and in June 2015 gave a directive to the Mumbai Municipal Corporation, the local government body, to completely ban the Victoria carriages by June 2016. The court also found that the carriages were illegal since the municipal corporation had a policy of not granting licenses to the horse drivers. Victoria carriage owners quickly got a crack team of lawyers together and filed a special leave petition in the Supreme Court seeking permission to continue to operate the carriages in Mumbai. In April this year, the Supreme Court told the carriage owners to return to the Bombay High Court with a review petition, but allowed the carriage owners to continue their trade for another 6 months or until the lawsuit could be settled. The court also told the Maharashtra state government to develop and implement a rehabilitation plan for the carriage owners and drivers. If you're confused by all this, you're not the only one. My producer and I asked several police officers in Marine Drive, police officers who have daily contact with Victoria carriage owners and drivers, about the legality of the carriages, and they said they weren't sure either. All the while, the carriages continue to operate. On Marine Drive, we met a Victoria carriage rider named Sunil. Sunil and his horse, a 20-year-old black stallion named Rocky, have been riding Victoria carriages up and down Marine Drive for more than a decade. Sunil told us that he is terrified of having Rocky taken from him. Riding horses his whole life, Sunil feels loyal to Rocky, who, yes, is inspired by the Sylvester Stallone character.
Alrighty, I'll invite up Tamara and 2 Johns. I love this slow, pensive walk up. It's really nice. Thanks so much for joining me, guys. Really appreciate it. So first of all, I'd like to ask about Mumbai, of course, and thanks for slotting in the middle. That's really nice there. It must have been an incredible experience. There were so many of you. What did you make of it?
Well, Mumbai for me was really eye-opening, especially with my story. I went to the slums and my issue was really emotional and sort of emotionally draining for a lot of people I interviewed as well. So to me, it was really eye-opening and it was an incredible experience, something that you'll never experience here in Australia. So it's really, really cool.
Of course, John, Vietnam, 2015.
Sure. Yeah, it was a really great experience and probably a lot of similarities from the other trips as well. There is that cultural and language barrier you have to deal with. My advice would be probably be prepared as much as you can. I'll be the first to admit I wasn't prepared enough. But yeah, and also in addition to that, just be prepared for things not to go to plan as well. So be flexible in your approach.
Certainly, yeah.
I probably found the thing that stood out the most to me was how long traffic takes. That is something you cannot prepare for. And I quickly realized, and I think it's a culture in India as well, that if you're an hour and a half late to an interview, it's okay because they just assume you were caught in traffic or the train just didn't arrive, which happens quite a lot in Mumbai. And it takes just a long time to get anywhere. So what I'd recommend is if you're going to plan when you're going to do your interviews before you actually get to where you're going, just scrap that and just sort of wing it every day. And they're fine. People are fine with that if you say, oh, are you free this afternoon or are you free tomorrow morning, rather than trying to plan it 3 or 4 days ahead.
We teach best practice journalism here, don't we?
Yeah,
certainly.
definitely.
One of the questions that I'd like for you guys, just a bit on the spot, of course, Bruce tells us about the 3 levels of stories. All the stories that sort of we've been seeing tonight are on that sort of 3rd level, that are very sort of social commentary type stories that really delve into the heart of an issue. How did you go working towards such a complex issue, especially when it exists overseas?
And then we'll do India.
Sure. Probably the best one I can talk about wasn't actually my story, but my student colleague Jesse Thompson's story, and I had a hand in helping him film the story. He was talking to a little old Vietnamese lady who ran a burger shop in Da Nang, which was right in the centre of the war. And yeah, it was amazing. She'd befriended some American soldiers there, and she still was in touch with them to this day, which I found quite amazing. But things like that, you'll pick up incredible stories just by chance or doing a bit more research here and there. So yeah, Jessie did a fantastic job there. Did you have any?
Yeah. Well, I found my story off Google. I Googled so much about Mumbai, and I wanted to do something that was sort of life-changing for people and sort of meant a lot to me. Because I study law as well, I read a lot about domestic violence cases, and I know what our legal system's like in Australia, but I was really interested to see what India was like because they're so far backwards to Australia. And to go there, the people I interviewed really respected that the fact that I was interviewing them and the fact that I wanted to help them in a way that I could showcase their story. And today, even this was 8 months ago now, I'm still in contact with one of the legal centres I interviewed there, and they're still emailing me all the time, asking me what's happening, where am I going, and it's nice. You build relationships over there because people form a sense of trust with you.
Sorry, what was the question again?
Complicated stories, social commentary.
Okay.
I could just ask you about podcasts.
Yeah,
so
I can work them both together. In regards to India, and you'll find this on your trip as well, the caste system is very real, and that will, at least if you do a social commentary or you delve into a social issue, you will run into a minefield there. For example, in the audio piece that I did, the carriage drivers themselves were all Dalits, so they're from like the lowest class in India. And so there was two significant issues there. They didn't want to talk to me because traditionally and still now in India, there's a really bad tradition of journalists just absolutely beating up on the Dalits. So they just don't trust you. After a while, they realized the types of questions I was asking. They realized, oh, this guy's not here to just throw us under the bus, and they were openly and happily talking to me. Secondly was my buddy didn't want me to talk to them. He didn't want me to talk to Dalits. So he had his own prejudices about caste, which I just told him, look, if you don't do this, you're like, don't bother coming for the rest of the week, I'll just do it myself. And he just sort of realized, oh shit. Sorry.
We'll fix that in post.
Yeah. There we go, post-production. It's live streamed, isn't it?
Yeah.
To India. To India, okay. Anyway, so the caste system, I found a couple of issues there. Read up about it, and read up about, of course, the various cultures in India. Grab a textbook. That's what I found helpful. I just went to the library, grabbed a couple of textbooks and read up about it.
Questions from the floor, especially about India. I imagine you must be bursting to ask questions. Yep.
How do you work on establishing those trust relationships for all of you? Like, obviously you have a time limit. How do you sit down and make these people you're interviewing trust you, especially if it needs a while to develop that rapport?
Yeah, so the question, how do you develop trust? John, how do you do it?
In the case of what I was just talking about, the Dalits, people who traditionally are bashed by journalists, if you sort of ask them different questions to what journalists usually ask them, and they realize, oh, this guy's coming from a different angle, that instantly builds trust. In regards to other people, you have to I find the easiest way to build trust is by going, what do you want me to say? Or like, what's the story that you want us to tell? And then you ask those questions and you get them to sort of get like you, and then you ask the difficult questions at the end, obviously, and then you leave.
Tamara, especially, of course, you dealt with some very serious cases.
Well, just on that note, I had a lot of interviews that were really emotional. And so what I did before I got into the interview, before I got the camera out, before I got my notes out, I just sat and talked with them for about 10 minutes. I had a cup of tea. I told them about myself so they could sort of understand who I am and what I want to achieve out of this. And then through that, they started talking, and then that's when I snapped the camera on. And then they just kept talking and talking and talking. And then it was awesome because they sort of saw me as their friend and they would talk to me as if I was their friend. Like one of the ladies I interviewed, she talked to me for about 45 minutes. She just wanted to tell me everything. And there were some great snapshots I got out of that interview. So what I can suggest is you need to sort of get them to feel comfortable with you.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd just second that in terms of establishing some rapport before you start the interview and then going from there depending on the situation.
More questions? While someone thinks of one, John, yours is a good case where you freaked out about your microphone having issues. How do you deal with technical issues overseas?
Yeah, certainly brush up on all the technical knowledge beforehand. My mic cable, the connection wasn't working somehow, so we had to use a different mic which didn't necessarily link up with that camera, which made post-production a bit more difficult, and the sound quality wasn't as great, unfortunately, but these things happen, and yeah, just be prepared with these things and yeah, brush up on that before you go, I'd say.
Can I add to that? I'd recommend don't necessarily go, I'm going to do this story in an audio form. Go, I'm going to do this story, but plan to do it in audio, written, and video, because you have two backups then. And then if your second backup fails, you still have like a third one. And if that fails, then scrap the story. But for example, the audio piece that you heard earlier that I did was originally going to be a video piece. But I found in Mumbai, it was either inside and too dark, or it was outside and too bright. And so the video, there were quite a lot of shots where just the video was terrible. But I realized I had quite a lot of good audio that I just picked up throughout the day because I just had the Zoom kit on throughout the day. And if you hear something interesting, or you see a car going past, or horses in that case, or you go past a temple or something, you just get a couple of grabs. And make sure you ask more than you just think is going to be in your video, because then you can always fall back on a long form written piece as well.
Any more questions? No? Cool. Oh, yes, excellent.
I'll ask you guys. So you obviously went over there with your stories in mind. Did you come home with any other stories in mind, like that you wish you had actually changed to by any chance? Or was it just that focus, that one story?
Yeah.
Or did you experience?
I was pretty rigid with my story. I remember going into it being like, that's how it'll end. And I ended with being like, that's what I started with. So that was pretty cool. However, I did obviously add little bits and here and there. You know, I like what John said about, you know, just recording, or, you know, just taking as much in as you can with your devices when it's handy and when it's comfortable, because you don't know what you'll come up with. You know, I ended up publishing a photo essay as well out of it, just from little snaps and that sort of thing. So just get really excited about the opportunity, and all the content that you'll be able to capture is just always going to be generally pretty good, because it's pretty thrilling.
I found that the stories that I planned for months in advance were the ones that I didn't end up enjoying and weren't the best ones. The best ones that I made were the ones that sort of just came to me when I was there. So in saying that though, do plan ahead a couple of stories, because like they are fun and they feel a bit more personal to you because you've worked on them, and usually they're a bit more different to what anyone else is doing. And I'm sure you won't have competition for stories. We don't have competition, and I don't imagine you guys did either. So you don't have to worry about someone stealing your story, hopefully. In the industry though, you always have to worry about that.
Yeah, I think it just comes down to being prepared, but then also being open to trying new things, and like John was saying, don't have a fixed idea of what kind of medium you'll be doing the story in. Try and cover all bases, and then if something goes wrong in your initial idea for the video, you've got a backup.
Well, I planned out my whole story before I went, I had a big document with everything I wanted to do, and I did exactly that. But a lot of stories I found that were really interesting was actually going to the slums, because there's a lot of happy stories over there. And when you actually, I recommend that you should all go there and have a look at it. The tour guides are from the slums, and they want you to see the bright side of it and the happy side of it. And it's like a whole different city in another big city. And I thought that was a really cool story that could have been done, but I didn't do that. But something to think about, I guess. Yeah.
Excellent.
Can I add to that?
Yep.
Sorry. I think that's really important, what Tamara was just saying. Don't just go there and do either poverty porn or just where you bash India or Indonesia or poverty or poor people. Go there with an open mind, and I think the best stories that came out of our trip, at least, were sort of Tamara's stories and stuff like that, where you went to people that don't necessarily have their stories told in India and hence in Australia, and you go, I want these, the voiceless people, not saying that they're actually voiceless, they're just not heard in sort of mainstream media. Go to them, hear their stories, tell their stories, and get them to tell you the story, rather than going, oh, this place is terrible, look at the poverty. But you should always also be asking questions if someone's really happy and bubbly about something. You should go, well, why are you happy and bubbly about this?
Excellent. Can everyone thank Tamara and 2 Johns, please? Cool, so we're on the home stretch now, I promise. Now we've got our final, which was the very first will that essentially happened. And now the 2 people we've got coming up from that are now absolute hotshots in the industry. So Yay UQ. So that was Vietnam in 2012.
And welcome to Hollow Bay. My name is Jenna from the University of Queensland, who's travelled to Vietnam to gather social, political and tourism stories that you've never seen before. Follow us now as we journey through Hanoi and Ha Long Bay.
It's hard not to notice the urgency of construction happening in Ha Long Bay, the coastal beauty that has become a given on the itinerary of anyone's Vietnam holiday. With extraordinary limestone mountains poking through the seascape from horizon to horizon, it was a matter of time before sightseers started turning up in droves.
Ha Long has changed a lot from when I was a kid. Just a few years ago, it was a small, mountainous coastal town. When Ha Long Bay was recognised as a World Heritage Site, the government and private sector wanted to start investing and developing in the area.
This construction site will soon be a brand new restaurant on the waterfront of Ha Long Bay. There are hundreds of projects like this happening around the city, and it's tourism driving the development.
The value of the area has gone up a lot, so we've had to build the new and upgrade the old to meet the needs and accommodate for lots of international and local guests. There is a lot of job opportunities at the moment. We need at least 18 to 20 builders just for this project, with at least 6 months of work for each of them.
And it looks like there will be more to come. By 2020, Vietnam will be welcoming more than 10 million international tourists.
But I think the tourist industry in Vietnam in common is growing and growing. So I think how long with this beautiful nature here, sea nature, it will grow and grow as well.
Even 150 kilometres southwest at the picturesque province of Ninh Binh, heavy hitters in the global hotel market are now setting their sights on what has earned the nickname the inland Ha Long Bay.
We try to keep our hotel in the top of the hospitality of Ninh Binh city.
Will that be hard?
Very hard, but nothing impossible.
Not impossible, but hard indeed. With over 200,000 3- to 5-star hotel rooms to open across the country in the next 10 years. Harry Clarke, reporting from Vietnam.
Handicraft is a tradition that has existed in Vietnam since before Christ. Most forms require hard work and a high skill level for very little money.
I learned to sew from my father, and my father learned from his father. Sewing has been in this area for over 700 years and has been passed down through the generations.
Despite the popularity of the craft,
Many villagers need to have a supplementary income.
I can't make very much money from sewing alone, so I work in the fields. But I keep going because it is a tradition, passed down from older generations.
Another handicraft village nearby employs up to 45 locals, with income determined by skill level.
For normal workers, it's about $200 Australian per month. The work is all produced by hand, which requires a much higher skill level than machine crafts.
Just in time for Christmas, and handicrafts like those we have just seen being made in Lindberg make their way to Oxfam stores here in Australia. These products are all labelled fair trade, which means that producers are being paid reasonable prices for their work and nobody is being exploited.
Fair trade is enabling disadvantaged and marginalised groups a chance to lift themselves out of poverty and self-sustainability in the future.
By forming links with craft villages, Oxfam are able to enhance the standard of living of people in these areas.
We see villages that are getting better infrastructure through roads and schools that are being built. There's a lot of water sanitation programs that are happening to provide water to rural areas. So we're seeing the money go to very important projects.
Building communities from the ground up ensures that local economies remain stable.
So we're seeing a lot of homeless and also disabled, especially through the Vietnam War and Agent Orange victims, who are now able to be a primary income holder for a household. And this is positive for the spirit, and it's also very positive for children who are then able to see that these possibilities are available and that they too can make a big difference.
While Australians are showing more awareness for fair trade items, more support is needed in order to preserve this tradition in Vietnam. Alison Francis, reporting from Ninh.
There's such a noticeable difference here between the simple lives of the locals and the luxury of the tourism industry. And you can see a perfect example of that right behind me. There's an enormous massage parlour, and right beside it are a number of small houses stacked right on top of each other. And Hannah Konechny noticed another contrast here in Halong Bay when she visited the famous floating villages.
Magnificent and majestic, Halong Bay is one of the world's most inspiring landmarks. From the stunning beaches of Cat Ba Island to mysterious limestone rock formations, it truly is a traveller's dream come true. Other popular destinations which attract thousands of visitors each day are the floating villages. The floating villages of Halong Bay were once isolated communities, shut off from the outside world. However, with the region becoming a major tourist attraction in recent years, the local villagers have needed to adapt their traditional lifestyle.
Actually, in Halong Bay, got about more than 100 floating village, and small village got about 10 or 15 family. Some even got 100 or more than 100 family. The biggest one about more than 200.
6.6 million people from around the world visited Halong Bay in 2011, and so far this year, this figure has increased by 20%, according to Vietnam Tourism's website. Instead of shying away from the thousands of tourists, however, the local villagers have used this as an opportunity to form a lucrative fishing business.
They try to earn money from fishing. Okay, and there's some fishermen told me they can earn about 300,000-400,000 per day. Yeah, it's not bad in Vietnam. In some lucky days, you can get more. And when they have enough money, they can buy a land.
Ninh Binh is in North Vietnam and well known for the scenery around the village of Tam Coc. However, today we are visiting a less populated and more tranquil area of the Ninh Binh province, that of Trang An. Prior to our journey, we engaged in some fortune telling with a Vietnamese elder. As our futures looked bright, we decided that it was safe to continue our boat trip.
This is beautiful Trang An near Ninh Binh, and we're here to explore the sights and sounds via both bike and boat.
Trang An is sweeping landscapes, beautiful rivers and mystic caves. Unlike nearby Tam Coc, which is overrun with tourists, Trang An offers a truly peaceful and breathtaking picture of northern Vietnam. As the boat takes us through 9 caves, our crew cannot help but gasp at the sight before us each time we emerge. The round trip is 2 hours, but every tourist is completely taken by the surrounds. Our jelly boat legs now attempt to ride once again to an isolated restaurant in which famous chef Luc Nguyen once cooked at. Ninh Binh is well known for the specialty dish of mountain goat. Unlike other regions in Vietnam, Ninh Bing's goat grow on rock mountains, and therefore the meat is believed to be more tender and nutritious.
We've ridden just over 20 k's and we now find ourselves surrounded by lush mountains. The crew is starving, so we're about to head inside for some goat, which is going to be cooked traditional Vietnamese style.
The dishes that accompany the goat are flavoured with characteristic Vietnamese flavours such as chilli, lemongrass and coriander.
It is important that the meat is fresh. The best goat dish will have a lot of spices, garlic, ginger and herbs to accompany.
Following our feast, we ride a further 16 kilometres in order to climb Moo Mountain. We ride through several small rural villages in which the locals smile and welcome us as if we were part of their community. Our leader explains that this is the most beautiful place to view Ninh Binh. The steep incline has our crew pessimistic, but we begin the hike regardless.
We've just climbed 500 steps and are now overlooking the Tam Quoc region. As you can see, it is absolutely incredible.
Ninh Binh often gets titled as a place with not much. However, Trang An and Moo Mountain have offered plenty of delights. Lush green mountains with arching rock, rice-filled surrounds and a serenity that cannot be matched. Trang An is not one to be missed. Evie Madden reporting from Ninh Binh.
The University of Queensland's Vietnam Reporter crew is wrapping up its tour of Hanoi, Ha Long Bay and Ninh Binh. We're leaving Vietnam with some incredible stories and some truly special memories. You can find a permanent archive of all of our content online at vietnamreporter.com.au. On behalf of the entire team at the University of Queensland, come on for watching the Vietnam Quarter on ABC News 24.
I'll invite Nicole and Harry up to the stage. Ta. Thank you so much, guys, for coming and joining us. Really appreciate it. Alrighty, Ta, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, 2012.
That was such a trip down memory lane. I don't think either of us have watched those stories since 2012.
Yeah,
so
I can see why too. It's a bit of a cringe.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I upset you guys with that blast from the past. Look, my first question straight off the bat is you went on this trip quite a while ago, yet now you're fantastic in the field journalists now. You work in production and in journalism. How do you turn an opportunity like this into a job?
Well, I think what was really important about the trip was just creating a body of work that was as extensive as possible, because you need that to get employed. You need to be able to show employers that you have skills in the industry and that you have diverse skills, and to be able to go out and collect your own work and to show that you also have initiative and that you're a chaser is exactly what employers want to see. And so I think that is one of the main benefits of doing this course.
Yeah, exactly. Pretty much what Nicole said. But yeah, put your stories together and try and do like a really nice job of them, and post production just finesse it and make it as good as you possibly can, and then put it out. Excuse me. Put it out there and flog it. Put it online, publish on social media. Make a WordPress site and put all the content that you create there, and then you've just got this kind of online portfolio that you can just flick potential employers the link for, and they can see all your work there. So, anything you do, anything you put on your portfolio when you're a student is something that can help you get a job. And
what are the sort of skills that you learn on a trip like this that you'll be applying day to day in journalism, in the real world?
I think, and some of the previous guys have touched on it as well, like journalism, as well as doing a great interview and getting really insightful comments from your talent and asking good sort of thoughtful questions. It's just as much that as it is just the logistical shit fight that happens behind getting a story. Sorry,
fix it in post.
We'll fix that in post.
It's like leaving 2 hours earlier and things that would have been handy knowledge at the time. So that you don't arrive late and scrambling to make sure you've got all the batteries, charged up, and you've got all the gear and sort of where you're going and the address and what to tell the cabbie and things like that. That sort of logistical. I won't say that word again, but that just production stuff that goes on behind the scenes is, they're all equally as important skills as the actual journalism itself.
And I think too, one of the most important things you learn on the trip is to keep your eyes open for other potential stories, because for me, I know that some of the best stories, some of the stories that I came away happiest with were the ones that I didn't plan to do before I went over. So it's about, keeping your eye out for that scoop. And I think, you need that in the industry. You always need to be at a job prepared for the story to change course or to find a new angle. And also too, I think just getting the confidence to put something out there, to, be prepared for your content to be seen, and to develop that throughout the course, and, create work that you're happy with, and, to watch yourself back or listen to yourself back and do it with a critical eye and not be like, oh, I sound weird or I look ugly or whatever. You need to be able to do those things to improve, and, to have the opportunity to create as much work as possible and then watch it back critically is really important for you to improve and upskill in the industry.
Questions? I assume you guys must be dying to ask questions. One from the back, Bruce.
When I was with you, I saw you working together a lot. It's not a competition, as somebody said earlier. How much should you plan to work together?
So the question was, how much do you plan to work together? Nicole?
Yeah, it's really important because obviously, you can shoot your own work or you can record your own work, but it's always easier with another person. And when you're in the industry, typically you're not going to be working alone. For both of us, we work in teams at work. So, you need to, I guess, think about, like, in TV news, we always think about, like, what we're going to talk to the cameraman about beforehand. If you want a specific shot, you have to be able to express that to someone beforehand. So, to work with someone in a team and to be able to communicate with them what you want, communicate the gist of your story is a pretty important skill to have, and you develop that by working with someone else. And also, I think it's just nice to have someone to maybe give you a second opinion on, an angle that they would find interesting in the same story, or, if they pick something up, it's nice to kind of have a backup and someone to help you out when you're learning.
I'll butt in on this one quickly as well. My buddy that I got paired up with, Talia, I've got my one here. Yeah, that's right. My buddy that I got paired up with, Talia, she's actually at Vice News now over in Indonesia, which is really thrilling for her. But she was a great, sort of production assistant, but also a counterbalance to my ideas as well, because I think sometimes when you're so engrossed in the story, you can get a little bit carried away, perhaps. So it's good to constantly hash that out with a sounding board, working with a partner. And I know sometimes she was like, do we really want to explain, the sort of price stability of beef that much? And I'm like, oh, probably not. So I think working with somebody, at least in that sense, is just so invaluably important.
Yeah, exactly. You've got a lot to think about with the type of questions you're going to ask and what responses you're hoping to get and that kind of thing. It's always good to just have a second opinion. Someone might have an idea or see something or notice something that you didn't, and you definitely, it really helps to have as many people kind of involved in the process as you can. And, sometimes people have got skills and sort of notice things that you don't. So, you rely on the people that you're out there working with, and they rely on you as well. So, if you team together and make every story as good as it can be, the whole process is much better.
How much ad-libbing should you be preparing to do? Like, Nicole, you were talking about setting up shots and getting what you wanted in mind. If something goes wrong on the day, like, how much room for error do you have? So
the question, ad-libbing, how much room for error do we have?
If you're talking about ad-libbing and pieces to camera and stuff like that, I'm all about ad-libbing now. I wasn't at the time. I scripted everything and I would forget a word or it wasn't quite right and I'd try and shoot it again. But don't get in that mentality early because, especially working in TV, but also in radio, it's not good to be going off a script. Try and form stuff on the fly, because if you're doing a live cross, generally you don't have a script. If you're doing a piece to camera, you might be under pressure. You might only have, a short period of time to film it in. So I guess, yeah, for me, if I could go back and give myself some advice, I would say don't script ever in pieces to camera, in live crosses, things like that. you know, it's not a good habit to get into early, so I would recommend ad-libbing as much as possible, but still getting the facts right.
There's so much room for ad-libbing, like ad-lib the whole thing. No, but yeah, just kind of think on your feet and get your iPhone out and get a little shot that, you know, the camera's packed away and you're in the cab home and you see something cool outside. You know, like people, like nightly news do live crosses with iPhone these days. So, you know, record a little, you know, if you're out there to film a television story and you think, you know, there's a good bit of that sound that you're not getting, just get out your iPhone. It's production quality. It goes on the radio, you know, daily. So you know, your iPhone's, you know, your best friend for just getting those extra little bits that just sort of come to you on the fly. So ad-lib away.
I think there was a question over here before. Yep.
Yeah, I was just wondering, because you said that sometimes you were short on time quite a bit, how you prioritise framing shots and practicing, and really what you would try and focus on if you were late on time when you were getting a story going.
Yeah, so the question is, how do you prioritise your time, especially if you're running late?
Just roll the whole time. Just get as much as you can, because it's a lot better problem to have more tape than you need than there is to have not enough. So just shoot from the moment you turn up, and you want to get the grabs as well. So if you're short in your interview, you've only got like a minute to do it, then just bang out the most important questions and just kind of let them talk. And I don't know, like you don't have to publish for that night, so you know, you're gonna have time to get your stuff. But just as long as you're recording everything that you get when you're there, you know, you should get all the ingredients.
And even though we're talking about ad-libbing and making sure that you're not too prepared, do try and have an idea of what your story is going to be, what your angle is going to be, the kinds of questions you're going to ask, with room for, you know, flexibility if something else comes up. But that way you kind of have in your head already an idea of what shots you want, how you're going to, you know, bookend your story, what the best shot's going to be for the start, what your wrap-up shot's going to be, what maybe your piece to camera needs to be that you don't have vision for. You know, be prepared with those kinds of things in your head. If they need to change, so be it. But at least then, if you have minimal time, you know what you're kind of prioritising as you go.
More questions?
What about sharing overlay between reporters doing different stories? Did you do that?
Yeah, I think especially, well, I had the best of intentions going into the Indonesia trip doing that, but the Wi-Fi we had was not so conducive to sharing a lot of footage on an online forum, which was a bit disappointing. But certainly key facts, bits of audio footage you're going to be sharing around as much as you can. I think I edited the supers for a couple of people's stories as well when they were a little bit under the pump. So sharing's very important, and you know, it speaks to the sort of buddy system and setting up a good arrangement for sharing. Even just misc wallpaper and overlay and that sort of thing, like opening shots and traffic shots, and there's a shot of people at a market. You know, it's good just to share around, because when you don't have time, if you've been at a market and you could only get 1 or 2 interviews but you don't have enough overlay, then you shouldn't be afraid to tap somebody who was at the markets yesterday and say, hey, look, could I have some of your overlay and swap something? Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's good to be across what other people are doing day by day in case they can nab something for your story, you know, that you don't have time to get.
And that happens all the time in the industry as well, like, you know, sharing footage between 9 News and a current affair. Like, you know, the news guys might have seen something on ACA that's going to work for one of their stories, so they'll just hit us up for some shots of that. You know, take heaps of hard drive space so that you fit all your vision on there and you don't have to delete stuff, because when you get back here into post-production, someone might come to you and say, oh, you were filming when that cab went past where the silly dog was hanging at the window or something, and, you know, it might be useful for their story. So just keep everything that you've got, and, you know, you never know what might come in handy. Does that answer the question? I've kind of forgotten. Sharing vision, so.
And likewise, if you've got something that you know might work for someone else's story, let them know. Sharing is caring.
Yeah, getting across each other's itinerary is also good for safety as well. I think because you're going to somewhere where, of course, it's not as easy to get around as Brisbane, it's also perhaps maybe not as safe. So being across where people are going, constantly keeping in contact is really important, just to make sure everyone in the group's safe and accounted for. It's also a good bit of advice, yeah. Yep.
How do you, like, I don't know how the overseas trips work, but how do you cope with sort of having a vision in mind for your story and having to go out and do the interviews not necessarily in a linear format? How do you cope with seeing how it all fits together before you see it fitting together?
You seem like you've got nothing to say.
It's going to be out of chronological order and out of the order in which it's going to finally appear in the story. So, you'll have time to piece it all together and put it in a, good sequence afterwards. But yeah, maybe just try not to let that worry you too much. I don't know. It's kind of hard to say because you don't know sort of the context. But as long as you shoot as much as you can at every location and get all the grabs you need, and just have a bit of an idea about how it's going to play out, then it should come off for you.
Mm. And I think that's why it's good to, when you think about selecting your talent, to try and find people with different angles and different opinions, so that when you're out on the road, when you're forming your stories, you don't feel like you're getting the same answers twice. You feel like you're getting, a rich information from lots of different people.
Any other questions, or is everyone really keen to pack it in?
So it's going to be a big day.
Yeah, big day, I imagine. Well, could everyone give these two a big round of applause? Thank you for that.
Before we go, I do just want to say one thing, a little TV insight that might help. When you do pieces to camera, I noticed on these, a lot of the time, in fact, I think nearly all of the time it was static, so people were standing still. Really, in the industry right now, there's a push for movement. Our bosses say it should be two types of movement. You should be moving and the camera should be moving. So try and think about that, when you're out on location, when you're shooting something. Try and think about telling a story, taking someone on a journey, illustrating, something's coming from over here and moving over there. That sort of thing, that's what's going to get you noticed by an employer. That's what, is going to set you apart from someone that doesn't have any practical experience. Any sneaky tips, Harry?
How do we get hired?
Yeah, last little tips is, well, I don't know. One thing, I know you all want to go to bed, but or just to go home, is that there's a lot of sort of like doom and gloom, commentary about the industry at the moment, and there's no jobs and that kind of thing. It's it's not quite true. If you work hard and you're keen and you want to be a journalist, the jobs are out there. Just sort of keep pushing and gather your portfolio, because it's more important than ever that there are journalists around. So and the jobs are turning over, quick enough. It's not like the massive newsrooms like there was back in the in days gone by, but there's work out there for journos if you want to be a journalist. So yeah, don't be discouraged by the negative commentary that you hear.
And like Harry said before, flog your stories. Find out who's the bosses in the newsrooms. Tell them you're going, to ask if they want anything. If there's any local angle that you can take, anyone that they want you to interview over there, make yourself useful now and they'll remember you.
Put it on your phone, so when you're in the car with the ABC journalist, you say, hey, look at this thing that I did. Yeah. Just sell yourself. Thanks very much, guys. Really appreciate you guys having you here.
Good luck.
And with that, we'll bring it to a close. So thanks very much for coming along. I hope you guys who are going to Jaipur have a wonderful experience. Remember, those EOIs for the Indonesia trip are coming up towards the end of semester, before the end of semester. Have a wonderful night. Thanks, everyone. Cheers. Half of that. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Cheers, Tim.